everybody. Welcome to the Abroaders Travel Podcast, your weekly meetup with thousands of entrepreneurs, hustlers, creators, nomads, ninjas, wanderers, and world changers, all seeking to build the skills and connections to live a life without borders. If you want to learn more about what we do or download our entire podcast archive, check out the website, abroaders.com.
Happy Wednesday morning, and welcome to another episode of the Abroaders Podcast. I am AJ, doing the show alone. Eric is traveling right now. He's actually in Portugal, and he just flew to Lisbon from Salvador. I think he had an overnight there, and then he is going to come join George and I in Barcelona. Show notes for today's episode can be found at abroaders.com/howmany. So in today's show, we're going to use broad strokes to cover how many points you need to get where you want to go. This is something we get asked a lot, and it's something that's really not that fun to look up, not that easy to look up in some cases. You know, for example, Delta doesn't even really publish an award chart. You just kind of have to have an understanding of their old award charts and any trends as far as how they're pricing tickets now, or just manually look over the course of a month or two and see where the prices come in at. So we're gonna handpick a few destinations and giving you an idea about what your points can get you. Once again, today's show notes are at abroaders.com/howmany. Before we get into things, I want to share Eric's redemption. It's not rocket science, but I think for some of the novice travel hackers, this can kind of open up your mind a little bit to the possibility of points and miles. Typically, we focus on American, United, and Delta. We've got a lot of American listeners, and that's the type of points a lot of people are earning, and then obviously you can use their partners to travel really anywhere in the world. But those are kind of the big three, and they cover the big three alliances as well, being SkyTeam, One World, and Star Alliance. So Eric's redemption is from Salvador, Brazil, that's in northeastern Brazil, into Barcelona. For those that don't know, that is kind of eastern Spain. So Eric used 40,000 Amex points for that flight. He transferred the Amex points to Aeroplan, that is Air Canada's program, and then he flew on Star Alliance member TAP Portugal from Salvador, Brazil to Barcelona, connecting in Lisbon. So the mechanics of how that went is Eric had some Amex points. Eric knew that he could transfer those Amex points to Aeroplan, which is Air Canada. And Eric knew that there would be a flight on TAP Portugal, one of their Star Alliance partners, from Salvador to Barcelona. Obviously, TAP flies a lot into Lisbon. Lisbon is not far from Barcelona, and they service Barcelona as well. So he had a pretty nice itinerary there. Moving into some news and updates, one thing you guys should take note of is that on March 30th, the SPG Amex card, that 35K offer, ends, or so they say. And this is important because, like we'd mentioned in previous episodes, this is not just a nice. This is as high as the offer has ever been. 35,000 points for a lot of people that do credit card churning or go after big sign-up bonuses may not seem all that attractive, but SPG points are super valuable given all of their transfer partners, and not to mention, you get a transfer bonus. You get a 25% transfer bonus when you transfer 20,000 points. So you're looking at quite a bit more than 35,000 points. After the minimum spend and a little bit more spending, you're looking at, you're more so closer to 50,000 points. We've also got some good news for this because some people were not quite sure, or they're tentative with applying for the business card. So there's a personal card and a business card. So these both have 35,000 point sign-up bonuses. So in total, there's 70,000 SPG points on the table in the form of bonuses. And some people were not sure if they could get approved for the business card, having not been incorporated, because of some conversations about Chase and what they've been doing and how it's been more difficult. And they've scrutinized people a little bit more for trying to get business cards. But thanks to 1 Mile at a Time, he shared a quasi-personal experience with one of his friends who is a sole proprietor, just started a company, and went through the process of signing up for the card. Long story short, ended up being approved. There are a couple key takeaways here, though. Lucky over 1 Mile at a Time did mention that he claims his friend was honest. I don't know if I believe that 100%, because sometimes I could see how people would be tempted to maybe lie about projected income or other business things. But he said he just mentioned, he was a one-man show, sole proprietor, just getting started, and he was not instantly approved, but that had nothing to do with him applying for the card as a sole proprietor. For some reason, there's an issue pulling the credit, so he called the reconsideration and ended up being instantly approved. So I guess the key takeaway here is that you still have some time. March 30th is when the 35,000 point sign-up bonus offer ends, and that is both for the personal and the business card. So you're running out of time there, but it's still on the table, and you can get approved for that business card as a sole proprietor. You do not need to be incorporated. And speaking of Starwood, we've got some interesting news also from I believe 1 Mile at a Time, and I think he picked something up from the Points guy. But we've talked about Marriott acquiring Starwood and how that may not be a good thing for their program. But something interesting has happened recently, and I don't even know how the hell this happened, because I thought the Marriott and Starwood thing was a done deal. But apparently a Chinese company outbid Marriott. And so now Marriott is essentially being kind of forced into a bargaining, or not a bargaining war, but they're essentially, so this Chinese company actually bid more for Starwood than Marriott. So Marriott has a little bit of time to make a better offer. So it'll be interesting to see how that shakes out. For what it's worth, Lucky over at 1 Mile at a Time, his take is that he thinks it would be better for the program if the Chinese company ended up winning this bidding war. So I guess only time will tell, but I thought that was interesting because I thought that was most definitely in the works. Other than that, not much news and updates in the past week, and we would prefer to stay slim on the news than just fill up the show with irrelevant stuff. So we're going to get moving on into the reason that the show notes are at how many. We're just going to kind of touch with broad strokes across a few regions that are really popular regions on how many points you need in all the major programs. And for the more advanced travel hacking enthusiast, the one thing that surprised me, even though I knew most of the stuff off the top of my head, is Delta isn't as bad as a lot of people say. They're kind of the clear-cut loser whenever there's a travel hacking or award travel debate. And I think that's because they do some things that travel hackers don't necessarily like. They don't publish their award chart. They've had some devaluations, hence, Delta Sky Miles being called Sky Pesos. But I think actually resetting, when you objectively look at things, that's a little dramatic. The one big knock I would say on Delta is not necessarily the amount of points they ask for, but availability at those lower levels. And obviously that's their prerogative, but Delta points can be really valuable, like we've mentioned before, if you are a little bit patient, if you don't need to use them for your next trip, if you can just sit on them for a little bit and just wait for the right time to strike when you have a good deal on a redemption. And then they can be as valuable as American points or United points or transferring one of the transfer currencies to another program. But the thing with Delta, like I said, is just I think it requires a little bit more patience than the other programs because the availability at those, what we would call saver levels, is just not quite as abundant. So we're going to kick things off with Europe. And all the points numbers that I'm going to mention are from the U.S., so that obviously means that when we're talking about Europe, you can go to Europe one way for this many points, or you can go from Europe to the United States for this many points. So starting with the big three programs, American, United, and Delta, in economy class, they're pretty much the same. American, 30K, United, 30K, Delta, 30K. The only thing I would note here is, along the lines of what I just mentioned with Delta, is that you're just probably not going to find as much availability with Delta at that 30K level than you will with American and United. Delta's a bit more sophisticated with the way they price their awards, and there's a bigger gap that they go through, the low and the high points, and they actually have prices in between, where I've seen prices for 30,000, 32,500, 37,500, where you do not see that with American or United. And as far as business class goes, American, with the new chart, they went up to match United at 57,500 in business, where Delta, as far as I know, and like I said, they don't publish a chart. So the best I've seen with Delta is 62,500. If I'm wrong, please let me know, because that'll be something to look out for. But the fact that that is the best that I've seen kind of tells you something about actually being able to redeem in business class. So the takeaway here that I will also mention with Southern South America, when we talk about business classes, there's really not a big difference with those programs. And depending on which airline you're flying on or which partner, I would say most definitely that Delta has a better business class product than United or American, than flying on American Metal, United Metal. Delta, I think, is by far and away the nicest airline in the U.S. And the final one that I want to mention that's kind of a dark horse is Air France. So most people don't really have that many Air France points, but they are a transfer partner of Amex, and you can go to and from the U.S. to Europe for 25,000 points. So that's a really nice deal. Their taxes and fees are going to be a little bit higher than the other programs, but it's not British Airways bad. You were talking maybe $75 or so. So it's still a really good deal. And another thing that we probably don't preach about enough is their promo awards. Their Air France promo awards, they do them once a month, are great. And you can often find deals from select cities in the U.S. to Europe for much less than 25,000 points, which is a really nice deal considering where everyone else is at. The big three is kind of stuck at 30K, is about as low as they go. Next region is South America, and most of the programs chop that up into two regions, essentially Northern South America and Southern South America. I believe American calls it South America 1 and South America 2. United calls it Northern South America and Southern South America. And Delta obviously doesn't have a chart, so their prices just reflect that they believe them to be different regions. So starting with Northern South America, this, for example, would be, say, Colombia as opposed to Argentina or Brazil. With United, we've got 20K in economy class, American 17,500, Delta 22,500, and the business class for United and American are the same. They're both 30K. So you can see there's not a huge difference here where American's price is better, but ultimately 2,500 points isn't a huge deal breaker either way. As far as strategizing for a trip, you're better off taking a peek at availability, and to have 2,500 points is absolutely worth it if there's going to be quite a bit more availability, and you can travel on the dates you want if you aren't super flexible. At this point, this is not a region I would necessarily think about taking business class to unless you're really points rich. It's not a bad deal. I mean, United, it's only, it's 20K in economy, 30K in business. That's not a huge deal, but you need to consider what you're actually going to be getting for that. United's business class isn't that great. But if you've got the points, it's not a horrible deal considering that it's the same amount of points you'd need to go to the next region we're about to talk about, which is Southern South America. So there's parity in economy class here. United, American, and Delta, their low levels are at 30,000 points. And in business class, there's a decent amount of parity as well. United's 55K, American's 57.5, and Delta is 62.5 in business class. Now, this is getting to the point where, in my opinion, business class can make a pretty big difference. So now we're not talking about a 5.5 hour flight. We could be talking about a 10-hour flight here. So you're at that point where business class could really help you, save a day of being exhausted after your flight, or just a much more pleasant experience. So when I see this, just on paper, you say, okay, well, of course, Delta's more expensive. They don't have as nice of a program. But like I mentioned before, I would consider Delta actually the best value in business class out of the three airlines, because that's if you're flying on a Delta flight, not a partner, and the same goes for American and United. If I had to pick between Delta, American, and United business class, by far and away, I would go with Delta, at least the way their planes are configured on the long-haul flights. Domestic business or first class on short flights is often kind of a sham. Maybe it's glorified economy class, but on a long-haul flight, Delta's business class is really good, and they have pretty solid service, compared to the other American carriers. My mom just had some experience on that coming from Detroit to Barcelona. I've had some experience on that on longer flights in the U.S., and it's a good product. It's good service. So only an extra 5,000 to 7,000 points for that, if you've got the points, I think is absolutely well worth it. kind of as has been the trend. There's actually quite a bit more parity than you think. There's a lot of debate over which program is best, but as far as the amount of points asked for by each airline to get there, pretty similar. With Asia, we've got American Airlines checking in at 32,500 at the very low level, up to 35,000 points, and then United and Delta are both at 35,000 points at the lowest level in economy class. And there's really not a huge difference in business class now, especially considering American's new chart. American's anywhere from 60,000 to 70,000 points, depending on where in Asia. United is 65,000 to 70,000, depending on where. And Delta's business starts at about 70,000 points. So I guess the key takeaways from breaking down all of these points is that there's quite a bit more parity than we give credit to for these airlines, especially after American Airlines devaluation. They've kind of gotten in line. They've still got, a great chart. They go everywhere. They've got great partners, and you can still get just an enormous amount of value out of travel, but they're no longer the head and shoulders, clear-cut winner, leaps and bounds ahead of people. And on the other side of that, I think Delta should be given a little bit more thought. I don't think it's the best program. I don't think people should be bullish on Delta and go all in on Delta, but I don't think Delta should be ignored when there are opportunities, especially for those people with flexible travel schedules. Because, like I said, Delta just doesn't seem to have quite as much availability at those saver levels. Hey, if you got a bunch of points, then you don't need to find that flight for, say, 30,000 points if they're asking for 37,000 points. That's no big deal. But I really do think that Delta's gotten a little bit of a bad reputation over some things that aren't as bad as everyone said. So the key takeaways there are, if you're to go with Delta, just be willing to sit on the points a little bit, and if you are patient, you can get big value out of them. I've personally gotten really good deals on Delta flights over the past couple of years just by being patient. Ended up being just as many points as it would with the supposedly cheaper programs like American and United. So that's pretty much that. And then we didn't talk about taxes and fees, because taxes and fees for most of these are going to be pretty similar, negligible. And when we're considering international travel and flights that cost over $1,000, I don't think it's necessary to nitpick about $20 here and there. The only one I did mention is Air France, where you're looking at from the U.S. to Europe around $75. It depends. You can get less, but I just did a quick search, and that's what most of them are coming in at. It was about 70 euros, so that's about $75. So I hope you guys enjoyed the show. You can check out show notes today at abroaders.com/howmany. And in there, we will also have a link to the Abroaders resource page if hearing about Eric's redemption using Amex points to Air Canada and then flying on their Star Alliance member sparked your imagination with the different programs and partners. You can head on over to abroaders.com/programs. And we've got the big programs there. And if you want to see everyone that is in an alliance, just click on the alliance and then just pick an airline there. And then on that airline's program page, we will list all of their partners. So once again, show notes at abroaders.com/howmany. And this week's track is by Australian indie rockers Atlas Genius, and the track is If So. Safe travels.
Hey Broaders, don't be shy. Hop over to the website and join our email list for exclusive travel hacking content. If you like what we're up to, the best way you can support the show is by leaving us a 5-star review on iTunes. Lastly, we would love to hear from you, so send your show feedback to Eric or AJ at abroaders.com. We will see you next week.
And don't be talking, maybe your mama's flying high as a kite. And you're just like the next one, 'cause we'll be walking lonely tonight. Lonely tonight. If so, we know we'll be coming. If so, we know we'll be coming. If so, we know we'll be coming. Everybody's faking like they can, it makes it alright.